Old Hollywood had strict rules. Female stars had to be elegant, modest, and perfect. But some actresses decided to break those norms, challenging the system with nude scenes that shocked the industry and the public. Today, we're telling the story of the 16 classic Hollywood actresses who bared it all on screen and sparked controversy. Ready to dive in? Let's get started. Hedy Lamarr was more than just a stunning beauty. She was a pioneer of erotic cinema when the world wasn't ready for it. In Ecstasy, 1933, she became the first actress to fully undress in a commercial film, a scene that sparked outrage from censors and conservative society. But the controversy didn't end there. In the same film, Lamarr simulated an orgasm on screen, something that was unimaginable at the time. The scandal was so intense that the film was banned in the United States and several European countries, and even Pope Pius XI publicly condemned it. Hollywood embraced her years later, reinventing her as a glamour icon, but they never forgave her for breaking taboos before her time. Jane Mansfield was Marilyn Monroe's direct competition, but while Monroe carefully guarded her image, Mansfield wasn't afraid to provoke. And in 1963, she became the first major Hollywood star to appear fully naked in a US commercial film, Promises, Promises. The film was an absolute scandal. Images of Mansfield naked in the bathtub and in bed appeared in magazines, sparking immediate censorship. The film studios and conservative press attacked her mercilessly, accusing her of crossing a line that should never have been crossed. The damage was irreversible. Although she was a media star, her career crumbled after this film. The major studios blacklisted her, and she had to settle for low-budget productions. Marilyn Monroe never needed to undress to be the most desired woman on the planet, but in 1962, with her career faltering, she decided to take the plunge in a scene that became one of her most iconic images. In Something's Gotta Give, Monroe filmed a scene in the pool where she took off her bikini, becoming the first actress in Hollywood history to perform a full frontal nude scene in a major studio production. The scene was promoted with photos, and the anticipation was immense. But the film was never finished. Monroe was fired from the project, and shortly after, she died under mysterious circumstances. Brigitte Bardot wasn't born in Hollywood, but her sensuality shook the entire American film industry. In And God Created Woman, 1956, she broke all the rules by showing her body naturally, without any inhibition or censorship. The film wasn't just about nudity. It was about female desire, something that shocked the puritanical audience of the time. American critics attacked her, but the public couldn't look away. Bardot became a global sex symbol and the muse of the women's liberation movement. Sophia Loren was the embodiment of Italian glamour, but in 1954, she sparked a storm of controversy with a topless scene in Two Nights with Cleopatra. Although the film was a fantasy about the legendary Egyptian queen, a scene in which Lauren appeared half-naked was too much for the morals of the time. The film was banned in several countries by censorship, and in the United States, it was distributed with drastic cuts to remove any trace of the controversy. However, the scandal didn't damage her career. Instead, it turned her into a symbol of unattainable sensuality in Hollywood. In 1934, Maureen O'Sullivan caused an earthquake in Hollywood with just one scene. In Tarzan and His Mate, her character, Jane, dives into a lagoon completely naked, in a shot that showcased her figure with a naturalness the industry had never seen before. The scene sparked outrage from the most conservative sectors, and it was one of the key reasons for the implementation of the Hays Code, which, starting in 1934, banned full nudity in Hollywood for decades. After the censorship, copies of the film were edited, and the scene disappeared for years, but the controversy remained etched in the history of cinema. Veronica Lake was one of the great divas of film noir in the 1940s, but her career collapsed at a dizzying pace. In 1970, desperate to regain fame, she made a drastic decision. She appeared nude in the film Flesh Feast. Far from being a grand comeback, the film was a low-budget production with an absurd story about soldiers and conspiracies, where Lake's nude scene was more of a cheap trick than an artistic moment. Instead of reviving her career, the scandal only served to drag her down even further. Simone Silva didn't appear in films, but her scandal was even bigger than many actresses who did. At the 1954 Cannes Film Festival, she posed topless during a photo session with Robert Mitchum in an act of provocation that set off chaos in the press and almost caused a riot. Horrified, the festival organizers blacklisted her from future editions, and Hollywood studios, which had initially shown interest in her, decided to distance themselves completely. Her boldness turned her into an outcast in the industry, and she never managed to solidify her career. She tragically passed away at just 29 years old. Elizabeth Taylor was always the epitome of elegance and Hollywood royalty, so when she accepted a role in Reflections in a Golden Eye that included a subtle scene, the impact was immediate. Although the scene didn't reveal much, it was enough to stir controversy. The audience wasn't used to seeing the refined Taylor in such an intimate context, and critics were divided between those who praised her for daring and those who felt it was unnecessary for an actress of her caliber. Unlike other stars, Taylor didn't suffer from the scandal. In fact, the intrigue helped promote the film, but she never again did a scene like that. Ingrid Pitt didn't belong to Hollywood's golden age, but her impact on the American film industry was just as strong. In the 1970s, she became the queen of British horror cinema, and with that, one of the most controversial actresses due to her nude scenes on screen. In Countess Dracula, 1971, she portrayed the legendary Ursabet Bathory in a film that combined blood, sensuality, and a tone that clashed with the puritanical image of traditional Hollywood. Her nude scenes were too provocative for the American film industry, which tried to minimize her impact on the North American market by censoring several sequences. Although she became a gothic horror icon in Europe, Hollywood never fully accepted her, marking her as an actress too daring for the mainstream industry. Joan Collins was no longer at the peak of Hollywood in the 1970s, but she found a second life in European cinema with much bolder roles. In The Stud, 1978, Collins surprised everyone with a new scene that completely defied her image as a star of the Golden Age. For some, it was a desperate attempt to stay relevant, but for others, it was proof that she could reinvent herself without fear of public opinion. The scandal was huge, but instead of sinking her, it brought her newfound fame, helping relaunch her career in the 1980s with Dynasty. Far from being ashamed, Collins always defended her decision. Angie Dickinson was an icon of film and television, but her biggest scandal came with a scene she didn't even perform herself. In Dressed to Kill, 1980, her character had a new scene that shocked everyone, but what no one knew at the time was that a body double was used to film it. The public and the press assumed it was Dickinson, and the uproar was immediate. Some criticized her, while others applauded her for daring to do something so bold at her age, but when the truth came out, the scandal only grew larger. Marlene Dietrich always played with ambiguity and sensuality, but in Shanghai Express, she dared to appear wearing a blouse so sheer that it was practically as if she were undressed. Although it wasn't an explicit nude scene, the suggestion was enough to send the censors of the time into a panic. The Hays Code had not yet been strongly enforced, so the film was still released, but it sparked outrage among conservative sectors. Dietrich never needed to fully undress to challenge the limits, and this film was proof of that. Greta Garbo was the mystery embodied in a woman, but in Mata Hari, she dared to appear in a scene wearing a sheer dress that left her almost nude. The film became one of the greatest successes of her career, but it also became one of the most censored, especially when the Hays Code removed several scenes deemed too provocative. Rita Hayworth was the symbol of the desired woman, and in The Lady from Shanghai, directed by Orson Welles, she dared to completely break away from her image as the perfect wife. Although there was no full nudity, the scene where she appears with short hair and a seductive attitude on the beach caused an uproar. In that era, insinuations could be more dangerous than nudity itself, and Hayworth suffered the consequences of being too provocative for the puritanical society of the 1940s. The controversy was so intense that her marriage to Wells didn't survive the scandal, and Hollywood never allowed her to return to being the same after this film. Jane Russell didn't completely undress, but her image in The Outlaw was so scandalous that censorship kicked in before the film's release. Director Howard Hughes designed a special bra to accentuate her assets, and the film was promoted with posters showing her reclining in a provocative pose, which was enough to spark fury among the more conservative sectors. The Hays Code tried to halt the release for years, but when it finally came out, it became a huge success thanks to the controversy. Hollywood imposed strict rules on what actresses could or could not do on screen, but these women challenged the censorship, scandalized the industry, and left an indelible mark on the history of cinema. Some were punished, others became symbols of a new era, but all of them broke barriers that no one dared to touch. Do you think these scandals helped change cinema, or were they just a way to attract an audience? Let me know in the comments, and don't miss the next episode, where we continue revealing the most surprising secrets of old Hollywood.